We were deeply in love until money entered the family and split us apart. People used to smile when they saw us together. Not because we were perfect, but because we looked comfortable. Mara would laugh at my terrible jokes, and I'd know what she needed just by the way she sat down after work. We had routines that felt like home. Saturday mornings at the coffee shop on Maple Street. Tuesday evenings cooking dinner together, usually burning something. Sundays reading on the couch, her feet tucked under my legs. We weren't building something grand, we were building something real. She'd tell me about her day, the small frustrations at work, the coworker who always microwaved fish. I'd tell her about mine, the deadlines, the small victories nobody else would care about. We made each other's ordinary lives feel meaningful. "This is enough, right?" she asked me once, curled against my shoulder. "Just this." "This is everything," I said. I meant it. I didn't know then that enough would one day become a question with the wrong answer. What happens when enough stops being enough? We talked about the future the way people do when they're in no rush to get there. Someday we'd get married. Someday we'd buy a house, nothing fancy. Someday we'd travel more, maybe see Ireland or Iceland. The timeline didn't matter because we were already where we wanted to be, together. "Do you think we'll always be this happy?" Mara asked one night, watching the city lights from our apartment window. "I think we'll have hard days," I said. "But yeah, I think we'll always have this." She smiled, but there was something in her eyes I didn't recognize yet. Something that looked like hope mixed with worry. I thought it was just normal relationship anxiety, the kind everyone feels when things are going well and you're waiting for something to go wrong. I wish I'd asked what she was really thinking. Maybe she would have told me she was afraid her family would never see me the way she did. Could I have changed what came next if I'd known? Mara's parents were polite to me, always polite. Silas would shake my hand firmly and ask about work. June would hug Mara first, then offer me a brief smile. At family dinners, I'd sit at the end of the table, close enough to be included, far enough to understand my place. They weren't cruel. They were just careful. I was the man their daughter loved, but I wasn't the man they'd imagined for her. Silas owned a small accounting firm. June volunteered at the library. They lived modestly, valued stability, and measured success in comfort and security. I worked in IT support. I had a decent job, a small savings account, and no plans to be wealthy. That was fine with me. It seemed fine with Mara. But I could feel the distance in her parents' eyes. The way June would mention Mara's ex, Trevor, who now worked in finance. The way Silas would talk about planning ahead in a tone that suggested I wasn't. I told myself it didn't matter. Mara chose me. That was enough. Was it, though? Money wasn't part of our relationship. We split rent. We took turns paying for groceries. If one of us had a tight month, the other covered more without keeping score. It felt fair and easy, the way everything between us felt. "I don't need expensive things," Mara told me once when I apologized for not being able to afford a weekend trip she'd mentioned. "I just need you." She wasn't lying. I believed her completely. She'd grown up in a home that valued practicality over luxury. Her parents drove used cars and took one vacation a year. Mara wore simple clothes and rarely bought anything she didn't need. We were aligned. We wanted the same quiet life, the same simple joys. That's what I thought, anyway. But looking back, I wonder if she was trying to convince herself as much as me. Maybe she was practicing a version of happiness that felt true in the moment but wouldn't survive outside pressure. How long can you live the life you want when everyone around you wants something else for you? Mara told me once that she felt safest when things stayed simple. We were lying in bed, the kind of lazy Sunday morning where the world felt far away. She traced patterns on my chest and said, "I don't like big changes. I like knowing what to expect." "Me too," I said. "Predictable is underrated." She laughed softly. "My parents always wanted me to be ambitious, go to grad school, climb some ladder, but I'm happy just being. Is that weird?" "It's not weird," I said. "It's honest." She kissed my shoulder. "You get me." I did get her. Or I thought I did. What I didn't understand yet was how deeply her need for safety was rooted in her family's approval. I thought she wanted simplicity because it made her happy. I didn't realize she wanted it because it felt like rebellion. And when rebellion becomes exhausting, what do people do? They go home. Was I ever really home? Or just a place she visited? I believed love was enough. That's the thing about being in love when everything's working. You don't question the foundation. You just build. Mara and I were building something I thought was permanent, a shared life. A future that didn't need to be impressive, just ours. "Promise me something," she said one evening, her head resting on my lap while we watched a movie neither of us was really paying attention to. "Anything," I said. "Promise me we'll always talk to each other, even when things get hard." "Of course," I said, running my fingers through her hair. "We're a team." She nodded, but she didn't say anything else. I thought we were just being sentimental, the way couples do. I didn't know she was already feeling the pressure building. I didn't know that hard would mean choosing between me and everything she'd been raised to value. Love was enough for me, but I was starting to realize it might not be enough for everyone else. When does love stop being a private thing between two people? The money didn't arrive with fanfare. It came quietly, during a stressful week when Mara's car broke down and the repair estimate made her cry. We'd figure it out, we always did, but Silas called that evening and offered to cover it. "No strings," he said when Mara tried to refuse. "Parents help their kids, that's what we do." Mara accepted. It felt harmless, generous even. Her father wanted to help his daughter during a tough moment. What kind of person would refuse that? "I'll pay him back," Mara told me that night. "It's okay if you don't," I said. "He's your dad, he wants to help." "I know," but she trailed off, chewing her bottom lip the way she did when something bothered her. Bother? But what? "Nothing, you're right, it's fine." But it wasn't nothing and it wasn't fine. It was the first small string, invisible but real, connecting our independence to her family's generosity. How many invisible strings does it take before you can't move freely anymore? June called a few days later to thank me. I was surprised. I hadn't done anything, but she insisted. "I just wanted to say thank you for understanding how families work," she said, her voice warm and sincere. "Silas was so happy to help Mara. It means a lot that you didn't make it complicated." "Of course," I said, confused. "Why would I?" "Some men get proud," she said carefully. "They see help as interference. But you're not like that, are you, Evan?" "No," I said. "I just want Mara to be okay." "Exactly," June said, and there was something in her tone that felt like approval, like I'd passed a test I didn't know I was taking. I felt good about that conversation at first. I thought I was being supportive. I didn't realize I was being trained to accept help without question, trained to see refusal as pride rather than boundaries. Looking back, I wonder, was June manipulating me, or was she just teaching me the family's language? Paul Marin entered our lives like a friendly suggestion. He was a friend of Silas's, a financial advisor with a warm handshake and an easy smile. He showed up at a family dinner, charming and thoughtful, asking questions that made people feel heard. "Evan, right? IT support?" Paul asked, settling into the chair across from me. "Solid field, stable. That's smart in this economy." I nodded, unsure where this was going. "Mara tells me you two are thinking long-term," he continued. "That's wonderful. Planning is everything. Have you thought much about retirement, investments?" I hadn't, really. We were focused on getting through each month comfortably. Retirement felt distant and abstract. "Not too much yet," I admitted. Paul smiled. "Never too early to start. I'd be happy to sit down with you both sometime. No pressure, just friendly advice." Mara squeezed my hand under the table. "That's really kind, Paul." It was kind. That's what made it so effective. Who refuses kind advice from someone trying to help? When does advice become direction? Plans started changing without discussion. Small things at first. Mara and I had talked about taking a weekend trip to the lake, something cheap and easy. Then Silas mentioned a cabin his friend owned and offered to let us use it for free. "We should do that instead," Mara said, excited. "It's nicer than anything we could afford." I agreed. Why wouldn't I? It was a better option. But somewhere in that agreement, our plan became their plan. Our decision became their suggestion that we followed. Then Paul scheduled a financial planning meeting. Mara had agreed without asking me first. "I thought you'd want to," she said when I hesitated. "He's doing it for free. It's a huge favor." "I know," I said. We didn't talk about it." "There's nothing to talk about," she said, smiling. "It's just advice, Evan. Just advice, just help. Just generosity. All of it reasonable. All of it impossible to refuse without seeming ungrateful or difficult. When did our life stop being ours to plan? I felt included in conversations, but not heard. At family dinners, Silas would ask my opinion about something, work, politics, the weather, but his eyes would glaze over before I finished answering. He'd nod politely, then turn to Paul or Mara and continue the real conversation. June would ask how I was doing, but the question felt like a formality. She didn't really want to know. She wanted to confirm I was fine so we could move on to more important topics. Mara tried to bridge the gap. She'd bring me into discussions, reference things I'd said, make sure I was included. But inclusion isn't the same as belonging. I was there, physically present, but the family operated on a frequency I couldn't quite tune into. "They're trying," Mara said one night when I mentioned feeling like an outsider. "They just don't know you yet." "It's been 2 years," I said quietly. She didn't have an answer for that. She just squeezed my hand and changed the subject. "How long do you wait to belong somewhere before accepting you never will?" "Just be patient with them," Mara said after a tense family dinner where Silas had steamrolled my suggestion about something minor. "They mean well. They're just set in their ways." I wanted to be patient. I wanted to believe that time would soften the distance, but patience was starting to feel like erasure. Every time I adapted to make her family comfortable, I lost a little more of myself. "I am being patient," I said, "but it feels like I'm always the one adjusting." "That's not fair," Mara said, her voice tight. "I adjust too. I'm in the middle of this, Evan. It's hard for me." She wasn't wrong. She was caught between me and her family, trying to keep everyone happy. But the weight of that position was changing her. She was becoming someone who mediated instead of chose. Someone who managed instead of stood firm. "I know it's hard," I said softly. "I just wish I didn't feel like I was losing you to them." "You're not," she said, but her voice wavered. "When someone asks you to be patient, are they asking for time or surrender?" The favors multiplied. Silas paid for Mara's dental work when our insurance didn't cover it. June bought her a new winter coat, insisting the old one wasn't warm enough. Paul helped us restructure our small credit card debt at a better interest rate. Each favor was logical, helpful, impossible to refuse without looking foolish or proud. But each one also came with an invisible weight, gratitude that felt like obligation. "We should do something nice for them," Mara said one evening. "They've been so generous." "Like what?" I asked. "I don't know. Maybe we could host dinner or get them a gift." I thought about our budget. Anything nice enough to match their generosity would stretch us thin. Anything modest would look cheap next to what they'd given us. "We'll figure something out," I said. But I knew we couldn't match them. That was the point. Their generosity wasn't just kindness, it was a demonstration of power. They could give more than we could return. And that imbalance was quietly rewriting the terms of our relationship. Can you ever be equal with someone you owe? Decisions started being framed as best for everyone. When Mara and I talked about maybe moving to a different neighborhood, Silas mentioned a condo development near their house. "It's a better investment," he said, "and you'd be closer. June would love that." When I suggested we skip the big family Christmas and spend it alone together, June's face fell. "But we're family," she said softly. "Family should be together." When Paul recommended a financial strategy that required us to save more aggressively, Mara agreed before we'd even discussed whether we wanted to. "It makes sense, doesn't it?" she asked me later. "We can't stay in this apartment forever." "I know," I said, "but I thought we'd decide together where we want to go, when we want to go there." "We are deciding," she said, frustrated. "I'm just listening to advice." But advice had become expectation. And expectation had become pressure. And pressure was slowly replacing choice. When does helpful guidance become control dressed in kindness? Mara started apologizing before I even spoke. I'd come home from work, and she'd meet me at the door with, "I know you're going to be upset, but..." My dad offered to help with the down payment. "Paul thinks we should buy sooner rather than later." "Mom wants us to come to dinner Thursday." I know we had plans, but it would mean a lot to her. Each apology came with a justification. Each justification came with a request that I be understanding, flexible, supportive. "I'm trying to be," I said after the 4th apology in a week, "but it feels like I'm always the one being asked to understand." "That's not true," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "When's the last time you told your parents no?" I asked gently. She thought about it. Her eyes welled up. "It's not that simple." I knew it wasn't. But simplicity was what we'd started with. Somewhere along the way, love had become complicated by other people's needs, other people's expectations, other people's money. If love is always negotiating someone else's terms, is it still yours? Love was sharing space with obligation now. I could feel it in the way Mara kissed me, distracted, already thinking about the next thing. I could feel it in the way she'd suggest plans, then immediately wonder aloud if her parents would mind. We used to make decisions based on what we wanted. Now we made them based on what would cause the least friction, what her family would approve of, what made sense financially, according to Paul, what kept everyone happy, except, increasingly, us. "Do you still love me?" I asked her one night, the words coming out more vulnerable than I intended. "Of course I do," she said immediately. "Why would you even ask that?" "Because it feels like we're losing each other," I said, "like we're becoming people we don't recognize." She cried then, not the loud kind of crying, but the quiet kind that comes from knowing something's true and not knowing how to fix it. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "Then choose me," I said. But we both knew it wasn't that simple anymore. When does love stop being enough to hold two people together? Silas pulled me aside after a family dinner. We stood on the back porch, the autumn air crisp and sharp. He handed me a beer and stared out at the dark yard. "You're a good man, Evan," he said finally. "I want you to know I see that." "Thank you," I said, unsure where this was going. "But I need to be honest with you," he continued. "Mara deserves stability, security, a future that's planned, not just hoped for." "I want that for her too," I said. "I know you do," Silas said, his voice gentle but firm. "But wanting and providing are different things. I've been talking with Paul. There are opportunities for Mara, career growth, financial security, but she can't pursue them if she's worried about—" He paused. "About maintaining a certain lifestyle." The implication was clear. I was the weight holding her down. "I love her," I said quietly. "I don't doubt that," Silas said. "But sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people need more." He went back inside, leaving me alone with the cold and the realization that I was being written out of her future. Paul cornered me a week later. We were at a coffee shop. He'd suggested meeting to check in about our financial progress. But the conversation shifted quickly. "Here's the thing about sacrifice, Evan," Paul said, stirring his espresso. "It's easy when you're young. You don't mind living small because everything feels temporary, but eventually, reality sets in. Kids need schools. Families need houses. Security becomes non-negotiable." "We're not there yet," I said. "But you will be," Paul said. "And when you are, Mara's going to need someone who can provide that, someone who's planned for it, built toward it." "She chose me, knowing what I could offer," I said, hearing the defensiveness in my voice. Paul smiled sadly. "People choose differently when it's abstract versus when it's real. Maturity is recognizing that and making hard decisions before anyone gets hurt worse." "You're saying I should leave her?" I said flatly. "I'm saying you should ask yourself if you're helping her or holding her back," Paul said. "Love her enough to give her the future she deserves, even if you're not in it." Is sacrifice noble, or is it just giving up dressed in better language? Mara asked me to compromise one last time. We were lying in bed, the space between us feeling wider than it physically was. She turned to face me, her eyes red from crying earlier. "My dad offered to put a down payment on a house," she said. "A real house, Evan, with a yard, near their neighborhood." "That's generous," I said carefully. "But there's a condition," she continued, her voice small. "He wants me to go back to school, get my MBA. He says he'll pay for it, that it'll set us up better." "And what do you want?" I asked. She was quiet for a long time. "I want to stop feeling pulled in two directions. I want to stop disappointing people. "You want me to say yes," I finished. "I want you to meet me halfway," she said, desperation creeping into her voice. "Just this once. Can you do that?" But halfway had been the goal for months now, and I was tired of moving toward a destination I didn't choose. "What if I can't?" I asked quietly. She didn't answer. She just turned away. How many times can you meet someone halfway before you realize you've left yourself behind? I realized compromise only moved one direction. Every conversation, Every decision, every plan, I was the one adjusting. Mara was adjusting too, but only to her family. Never to me. Never back toward what we'd built together. I can't do this anymore, I said one evening. We were supposed to be planning dinner, but the silence had stretched too long. Can't do what? Mara asked, her voice tight. Pretend that we're still choosing each other when you're really choosing them. That's not fair, she said. They're my family. And I'm supposed to be your partner, I said. But I don't feel like one. I feel like someone you're trying to fit into a life they've designed for you. She stared at me, tears streaming down her face. So what are you saying? I'm saying I miss you, I whispered. I miss us, the us that existed before all this, before money and expectations and obligations. Do you even remember what that felt like? Every day, she said, broken. I remember every single day. Then why won't you fight for it? I asked. She didn't have an answer. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. The silence grew between us like something alive. We'd go whole evenings without talking, each of us lost in our own thoughts. She'd check her phone constantly, messages from her mother, calls from Paul, updates from her father about the house offer. I'd sit across from her, watching the woman I loved disappear into a version of herself that fit her family's expectations. She was becoming someone responsible, practical, forward-thinking, someone they could be proud of, someone who wasn't mine anymore. Talk to me, I said one night, unable to bear it any longer. About what? She asked, not looking up from her phone. About anything. About us. What is there to say, Evan? Her voice was exhausted. You want me to choose. They want me to choose. I'm tired of choosing. You're not choosing, I said quietly. You're just letting things happen to you. Letting them decide for you. At least they're trying to help, she snapped. What are you doing? Just making this harder. The words hung between us. Cruel, true, impossible to take back. When silence becomes easier than conversation, what's left to save? I stepped back without anger. That's the hardest part to explain. I wasn't furious. I wasn't betrayed. I was just tired. Tired of fighting for a relationship that required constant defense. Tired of being measured against a standard I'd never meet. I'm moving out, I told Mara one Sunday morning. She didn't look surprised. When? She asked. End of the month. I found a place. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry it came to this. Me too, I said. We didn't yell. We didn't throw things or say hateful words meant to wound. We just sat together in the apartment we'd shared for 3 years and acknowledged that love hadn't been enough to overcome everything else. I really did love you, she said finally. I know, I said. I loved you too. I still do. Then why isn't that enough? Her voice cracked. Because your family taught you that love comes with conditions, I said gently. And I can't meet them all. She didn't argue. She just cried. And I held her one last time, knowing it was the last time. Can you love someone completely and still walk away? Mara realized it too late. I saw it in her eyes during those final weeks, the moment she understood that love and safety had been made to compete. Her family had offered her security, stability, a future without financial worry. I'd offered her something smaller, intimacy, partnership, a life built on our terms, not theirs. She thought she could have both. By the time she realized she couldn't, we were already too far apart to bridge the gap. I didn't mean for this to happen, she told me the day I moved out. We were standing in the empty living room, surrounded by boxes and memories. I know, I said. They didn't either. They really believed they were helping. Were they? She asked desperately. Was I wrong to listen to them? I thought about that. No, you weren't wrong. You just wanted different things than I did. And that's okay. It doesn't feel okay, she whispered. It won't, I said. Not for a while. But eventually you'll be happy. You'll have the house and the career and the security they wanted for you. And maybe that'll be enough. What if it's not? She asked. I didn't have an answer. What do you do when you realize the life you chose isn't the one you wanted? We parted without blame. That surprised people later when they asked what happened. They expected drama, betrayal, some clear villain to point to. But there wasn't one. Silas wasn't evil. He genuinely believed he was protecting his daughter. June wasn't manipulative. She was just afraid Mara would struggle the way she had. Paul wasn't scheming. He actually thought he was giving good advice. And Mara and I? We weren't wrong for wanting different things. We were just two people who met at the wrong time, or maybe the right time, that became wrong when circumstances changed. I hope you find what you're looking for, I told her when I handed over my keys. I hope you do too, she said. We hugged. Not the way lovers hug, but the way two people who once meant everything to each other hug when they know it's the last time. Then I walked away. No anger, no resentment, just a deep, aching sadness for what we could have been if the world had been smaller. If love without blame still ends, was it real? I left knowing love didn't fail. Pressure did. That's what I told myself in the months that followed, when I unpacked boxes in my new apartment, when I saw something that reminded me of her, when I woke up reaching for someone who wasn't there. Mara and I had loved each other genuinely, completely. But love exists in context. And the context, her family's money, their expectations, their vision for her future, was stronger than what we'd built together. It wasn't about fault, it was about forces. About systems bigger than two people trying to make a life. I don't regret loving her. I don't even regret leaving. I regret that we lived in a world where those two things couldn't coexist. Sometimes the saddest stories aren't about love dying. They're about love surviving while everything around it falls apart. About two people who still care for each other, standing on opposite sides of a life neither of them fully chose. We were deeply in love. That part was real. The rest, the money, the pressure, the slow drift apart, that was real too. And sometimes real things just hurt. The end.